At 2:45 a.m., an unsettling silence covered the Persian Gulf. Then, without warning, the night sky split open as a towering pillar of fire rose beside the U.S. fleet. There were no stand-down orders, no radio chatter, and no clear explanation. What appeared on the radar screens went far beyond anything the crew had trained for, even in their most extreme simulations. The countdown had begun. 40 minutes. From that point forward, every decision would carry consequences, and there would be no easy way back. The Strait of Hormuz, known as one of the world's most tense maritime chokepoints, seemed to hold its breath. Cutting through the dark waters at the front of the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group was an Arleigh Burke-class Flight 3 destroyer, fitted with Lockheed Martin's most advanced Aegis combat system. The crew had no idea that far below them, resting on the seabed, an Iranian-developed smart bottom device was waiting. This was not an outdated or simple threat. It was a modern asymmetric system designed to remain dormant until its sensors detected the unique magnetic and acoustic signature of a large U.S. warship. At 2:47 a.m., the device activated with chilling precision. It was positioned at a calculated distance beneath the destroyer's keel, creating a powerful underwater bubble shock effect. A violent pressure wave slammed into the hull, racing through the steel frame with enough force to overwhelm delicate onboard systems. Inside the ship, the damage unfolded where it mattered most, deep within the electronics. Sensitive circuit boards inside the Spy-6 radar system failed, cooling lines ruptured, and the steering mechanism locked at maximum deflection. The destroyer remained afloat, but its mission capability was gone. It was left blind, unable to maneuver, and trapped inside a rapidly tightening danger zone. At 2:49 a.m., the response aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford was immediate. General Atomics' electromagnetic aircraft launch system came alive, building a massive surge of electrical energy far beyond the limits of older steam-powered launch technology. Moments later, with a thunderous roar, Northrop Grumman's E-2D Advanced Hawkeye climbed into the night sky. Now acting as the fleet's digital all-seeing eye, the E-2D had to close the information gap at once. With Allied systems compromised below, the aircraft became the strike group's replacement vision, scanning the waters before Iranian IRGC fast-attack boat formations and Ghadir-class pocket submarines, already positioned for an ambush, could move in to finish the operation. By 2:55 a.m., the situation entered a new and more confusing phase. Iran began a wide-scale electronic interference campaign. From camouflaged positions along the coast, Iranian forces activated high-power transmitters, including Russian Avtobaza M systems, and domestically produced digital jammers. The result was a thick digital fog. Across the electromagnetic spectrum, the boundary between real and false began to disappear. Radar screens across the U.S. strike group filled with thousands of phantom targets, each one mimicking the speed, altitude, and radar profile of incoming anti-ship threats. This was a carefully coordinated attempt to overwhelm the Aegis combat system, pushing U.S. commanders into a moment of uncertainty as they worked to separate genuine signals from electronic mirages. At 3:02 a.m., the effect on the U.S. fleet became deeply serious. Even the powerful AN/S PY-6 radar systems began losing sensitivity under the pressure of the massive stream of false information. Navigation signals grew unstable, and the process of confirming real targets slowed dramatically, especially when it came to smaller underwater platforms such as pocket submarines. For several tense minutes, the strike group was operating inside a digital illusion, with its awareness sharply reduced. That brief opening was exactly what the Iranian Navy had hoped to create. At 3:10 a.m., the answer came from the sky. High above the disrupted zone, Northrop Grumman's E-2D Advanced Hawkeye activated its AN/APY-9 radar. Operating in the UHF band, its longer wavelength signals were far better suited to withstand the high-frequency interference aimed at shipboard fire control radars. Using advanced data fusion algorithms, the E-2D began filtering through the confusion, isolating signals that did not match the behavior of decoys. Then it found one, a suspicious contact consistent with an Iranian Ghadir-class submarine moving toward a launch position. Within moments, a Sikorsky MH-60R Seahawk helicopter was guided to the coordinates. The Seahawk released a sonar buoy, confirmed the metallic signature, and deployed a Raytheon Mk-54 lightweight undersea munition. A dim flash beneath the surface signaled that the underwater threat had been stopped. That precise response broke the pressure of Iran's multi-directional ambush and forced several vessels to pull back in disorder. At 3:15 a.m., after the covert approach failed, Iran shifted to a saturation strategy, aiming to overwhelm U.S. defenses with sheer volume and speed. From mobile launchers hidden among the coastal mountains, a large wave of long-range projectiles rose into the night. At the front of the formation was the Fatah 1, Iran's newest hypersonic maneuverable re-entry vehicle, capable of speeds above Mach 5. It was accompanied by a swarm of jet-powered Shahed 238 one-way drones. The sky filled with bright white trails as dozens of fast-moving objects rushed toward the U.S. strike group at the same time. This was the moment of maximum pressure. U.S. destroyers now had to respond to high-speed ballistic threats while also tracking low-flying drones skimming just above the water. Radar performance had been reduced, but heat signatures remained visible. Flying close to the surface, the MH-60R used its MTS infrared sensors to follow the thermal traces from the Shahed drone's jet engines. Target data was then passed through Link 16, turning the helicopter into the fleet's external set of eyes. At 3:22 a.m. aboard the escort ships, the atmosphere was tense, focused, and disciplined. Raytheon's SM-6 interceptors launched from vertical cells, climbing toward the upper edge of the atmosphere to meet the incoming Fatah 1 threat. Below, the struggling CIWS system, serving as the fleet's final protective layer, unleashed its 20mm rotary cannon. A dense defensive screen filled the air, aimed at stopping the Shahed drones that had slipped past the outer missile shield. The U.S. Aegis system was operating at the very edge of its limits, calculating multiple intercept paths in fractions of a second. The repeated thunder of launches and the steady hum of cooling pumps told the same story. The fleet was using every layer of its defensive power to stay in the fight. At 3:28 a.m., in the middle of this intense confrontation, Iranian commanders made a critical mistake. They rushed. In an urgent attempt to maintain a lock on the U.S. aircraft carrier, they kept their coastal fire control radars active at maximum power for too long. The signals radiating from those systems became like bright electromagnetic beacons in the darkness. At the same time, after completing its target designation mission for the destroyer, the MH-60R Seahawk quietly moved back behind the main fleet formation. It shifted from a direct engagement role to a long-range screening position, helping keep the outer defense perimeter sealed while remaining ready for search and rescue operations as the encounter moved into its long-range phase. High above, the electronic intelligence systems aboard Boeing's E-2D and EA-18G Growler aircraft quickly traced the signal sources with extreme accuracy. Without needing to enter any computer networks, U.S. forces unexpectedly gained a live picture of Iran's mobile launch structure. Every concealed launch position had now been revealed. What had been intended as Iran's largest coordinated move had instead become a map pointing back to its own vulnerable systems. At 3:35 a.m., the strategic focus shifted from active defense to pressure on the source of the threat. U.S. commanders understood that incoming projectiles could not be managed by interceptors alone. The task force had to disrupt the center of the opposing launch network. From a safe distance, a formation of Boeing F-15EX Eagle IIs, among the U.S. Air Force's most advanced missile-carrying aircraft, entered the operation. These jets were equipped with BAE Systems EPAWSS, a highly advanced electronic warfare suite designed for heavily contested environments. Instead of activating their own radars and exposing their positions, the F-15EX pilots remained silent. They received target coordinates from the E-2D through the Link 16 network and moved as part of a coordinated, long-range response. The main goal was clear: disable Iran's sensor network and break the connection between detection, targeting, and launch capability. At 3:45 a.m., Iranian commanders tried to recover. They activated backup radar systems and began rapid move and hide maneuvers, relocating mobile launchers in an effort to avoid the U.S. response. At the same time, they released a second wave of decoy drones, hoping to slow down the tempo of the American operation. But the U.S. response remained precise. The F-15EX formation released a coordinated wave of Lockheed Martin JASSMER standoff missiles and Northrop Grumman AGM-88 EAAR-GM systems. The low observable JASSM-ER moved close to the terrain, reducing its exposure to coastal air defenses. Meanwhile, the AGM-88-E relied on endgame targeting memory. Even if an Iranian radar system suddenly powered down, the missile could continue toward the stored GPS location and use its own millimeter wave seeker during the final approach. At 3:52 a.m., the results were decisive. JASSM-ER strikes hit coastal radar processing facilities, while AAR-GM systems located the transmitters responsible for the digital interference. As those key nodes went offline, Iran's electronic coverage began to break apart. At 3:58 a.m., with Iran's sensor network severely weakened, U.S. forces moved to exploit the information gap through system disruption. The goal was to break apart the opposing command and control structure. Using signals intelligence gathered by E-2D and EA-18G Growler aircraft, U.S. forces identified fiber optic relay stations and microwave towers connecting Iran's senior command structure to forward units. The objective was to cut the coordination links, making it difficult for forces on the ground to operate together, even if they still had equipment available. Precision strikes by Super Hornets using GBU-39 small-diameter bombs focused on these communication nodes, causing major disruption across Iran's tactical network. At 4:08 a.m., the impact of the command and control breakdown became immediate and severe. Iranian missile and drone units lost their wide-area battlefield picture. Groups of Shahed drones began flying unpredictably after losing GPS updates and ground control links. Many dropped into the sea or drifted in confused patterns. On the water, IRGC Navy speedboats, which had depended on coordinated Wolfpack tactics, became isolated from one another. Without fresh tactical updates, they could no longer track the U.S. aircraft carrier effectively. Some pulled back, while others attempted scattered one-way runs that were quickly contained by the fleet's defensive network. At 4:15 a.m., the psychological and tactical balance had clearly shifted toward the U.S. side. Iran's forces were no longer operating as a single coordinated structure. Instead, they had fragmented into separate groups with limited awareness and limited ability to support one another. Through the E-2D's integrated fire control network, U.S. commanders could now prioritize key targets with far greater control. The loss of connectivity slowed Iran's decision-making process, creating hesitation, confusion, and mistakes. By breaking the connection between sensors, command links, and launch systems, the U.S. had effectively reduced the asymmetric threat without having to target every individual launch platform. The battlefield was now set for the final decisive phase. At 4:30 a.m., the strategic picture in the Strait of Hormuz had changed completely. Iran's integrated air defense network had broken down, and its command and control nodes had been taken offline. From the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the final phase of the operation began. This was no longer only about immediate survival, it had become a long-term capability reduction campaign designed to weaken Iran's military potential for years to come. Lockheed Martin's F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters lifted off from the carrier using the EMALS launch system. Operating in full low observable mode, these fifth-generation aircraft moved through the remaining gaps in the defense network and headed towards strategic locations deep inland. The targets had been chosen with extreme precision. A concealed drone production site near Bandar Abbas, hardened underground facilities connected to hypersonic missile research, and the digital command hub supporting Iran's AI-linked swarm systems. Using Raytheon's GBU-53/B Stormbreaker smart bombs designed to track moving targets through smoke, dust, and harsh weather, the F-35C squadron began disabling Iran's next-generation military infrastructure piece by piece. As those facilities were put out of operation, Iran's ability to regroup or launch a coordinated response was sharply reduced. In less than 1 hour, the tactical balance in the Strait of Hormuz had been completely reversed. This outcome was not achieved through raw military power alone. It was also the result of superior system disruption, faster decision-making, and control over the flow of battlefield information. There is one detail about the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye that many people overlook: the AN/APY-9UHF radar. While much of the world focuses on billion-dollar stealth aircraft, the E-2D is one of the systems that challenges the very idea of invisibility in the sky. Most stealth aircraft are shaped and coded to scatter X-band and S-band radar waves, but the E-2D's UHF radar uses longer wavelengths, which can create a resonance effect. When those waves interact with the body or wings of an aircraft, the larger metal structure can respond electromagnetically, sending a stronger signal back toward the radar. Against the E-2D's watchful eye, a stealth aircraft is not always a ghost. Under the right conditions, it can become a bright signal in the darkness. That is why some call the E-2D the bane of ghosts. In the presence of this technology, concealment becomes far more difficult, and anything that appears on the screen can quickly become the next priority target.